Good evening and welcome. This is installment 5 of our series of student panels throughout the month of April, talking about different parts of student life. We've invited all the members of the admitted class of 2024. All of you are out there from all over the country and the world. Thanks for tuning in. Normally, the 5 of us would happily welcome you onto our campus, our home. But circumstances have prevailed to keep that from happening. So luckily, our students have been able to meet on this platform, and we're going to talk about one element of life that's common to everybody that's tuning in, the academic life. I titled it something catchy, Classes, Homework, and Teachers, which I think covers a lot of what you're going to do. I'm your host. My name is Chris O'Brien. I'm Associate Director of Admissions. And I brought these 4 students together because I like their academic journeys and I like them personally. I think they're very entertaining. With that as an introduction, please don't disappoint. What we'll do is I'll post them a few questions that we thought of that might work academically just to get the ball rolling. But I've also welcomed questions from any of you. I've activated the Q&A part of Zoom. So if we're not going a direction you want us to go in or you want us to cover something specific, maybe we can work that into our program tonight. Also, if it's possible, our students have put together their contact information at the end of our time together. You can reach out to any of them with maybe specific questions that were inspired by the things that our panelists said tonight. So I'm going to have you guys introduce yourself, and just so you don't step on each other, introduce yourself in order alphabetically of your first name. And your introduction will be who you are, where you're from, what you study, what year you are, and then for each of you, I think a great way to start would be what's been your favorite class at Boston College. And talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get the ball rolling with some other questions. So you figure out who will get us started.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Relly. I am a junior here at Boston College. I'm originally from Hopkinton, Massachusetts, so not too far from BC to start with. And I am majoring in neuroscience with a minor in education, and I'm also on the pre-med track. So I definitely have a wide range of academic experiences I can talk about with that. And it's really hard to choose a single favorite class, but the one that's probably been most impactful for me and the one that I have enjoyed the most would have to be Family, School, and Society with Professor Penny Hauser-Cram. I'm speechless about the class. It really focused on how various societal issues are impacting kids, not only in their school life, but also among their peers and in their families. And we really covered such a wide range of topics. And I feel like prior to taking that class, I didn't really feel comfortable talking about social justice issues, even though I really cared about it. But that class really provided me with a voice that I felt like I was able to stand up for what I believe in and feel informed enough to speak on those issues.
Great start.
Awesome.
Next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Harry Shenmue. I'm a junior, also from Hopkinton, Massachusetts. I promise this isn't a trend. It's just me and Emma. But I'm in the Carroll School of Management, concentrating in accounting for finance and consulting. But I'm also doing a double major, the College of Arts and Sciences in biology, also on the pre-med track. Again, not a trend. But we can talk a bit more about majoring across schools later on in the presentation as well. But my favorite class at BC has been actually one that's somewhat relevant right now, given the current situation. It was a class I took my sophomore year called Case Studies in Epidemiology. And it was co-taught by our Vice Provost for Research, Tom Childs, and Dr. Landrigan, Phil Landrigan, who is the head of the Global Public Health program at Boston College. And basically the way the class was structured was each week was a different case study in a different disease outbreak, something that was either communicable and non-communicable from Dr. Landrigan's career. So Dr. Landrigan has had a storied career being an epidemiologist at the CDC. He was part of the team, or his research was the team. His research was the impetus for removing lead from gasoline, and that corresponded to the year afterwards a 4-point increase in the IQ of newborn children immediately afterwards. And he was part of the team that is getting compensation for first responders for 9/11 for 9/11 first responders. He's just had a very like storied career, and just being able to hear his insight and kind of the process that he went through for each one of these different disease outbreaks was just incredibly instructive. And I remember each one of those classes is sitting there kind of hanging on to every word he was saying. And one really cool thing about classes at BC, I think in general, was that he was so involved and so interested in reaching out to us and making sure that we were, obviously keeping up abreast with the material, but also developing relationships and kind of cultivating our own passions outside of the classroom. And so at the end of the semester, he had us all over to his house for a barbecue, and we got to like meet him and his family. It was just one of those moments I think were just representative of how BC really emphasizes obviously your academic, your growth and your personal growth within the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, developing relationships and cultivating passions that end up ultimately kind of informing what you want to do in the future. So that was just one of those classes that I think kind of summed all that up together and was a really impactful experience for me.
Good stuff, Harry. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Fagan. I am a junior in the Lynch School of Education and Human Development. I'm studying applied psychology and human development with a minor in leadership in higher education and community settings. And I'm originally from Wilmette, Illinois, which is a suburb just north of Chicago. And my favorite class so far has been a class that I actually took freshman year called Experience, Reflection, and Action, that we kind of call ERA colloquially. So what's really interesting about this class is its structure, where we meet once a week for an hour and a half, and those first 45 minutes, we have a speaker come in, and that could be someone who's an academic advisor. We had the CEO of Charity Water come in, really kind of someone that covered a range of different topics. And then for the second 45 minutes, we'd actually break out into small discussion groups. And so the class is for freshmen only. And so it was only freshmen in the Lynch School of Education. And in those discussion groups, we would have an upperclassman TA to facilitate. And we kind of talk about what the speaker said and how we could mesh that and like reflect on that and apply it to our own lives. And so for me, that discussion group became a really safe space for me during my freshman year to talk about, hey, I'm feeling a little bit homesick, or I have this question about registering for classes and I didn't really know who to go to. And so that upperclassman TA and those other freshmen around me in the small discussion group became just my favorite part of my week during my freshman year.
That's great, Ellen. Thanks. Lizzie, you're last. Fire away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lizzie Johnson. I am a junior this year in the Morrissey College of Arts and Sciences, double majoring in International Studies and Economics, and I'm originally from Rosemount, Minnesota. One of my favorite classes so far was a class that I took this past fall in the economics department. It was called Impact Evaluation in Developing Countries, and it was super cool. The professor, Professor Chikello, is kind of known throughout the economics department because he teaches like the entry-level stats course, and it's known to be a really difficult but also really rewarding course. And I had taken that with him and was, the course went okay, but I was nervous. But this other class sounded super cool, and I'd heard great things about it. So basically, we looked at how different sort of economic initiatives in different countries worked or didn't work. And so things like, does adding textbooks to a country or to a school in a country actually make the students perform better, or do certain medical supplies actually help the people to the doctors to work better? And coming at each of these sort of problems through the different economic lenses that I had learned throughout like my freshman and sophomore years, it was very rewarding to see how some of those things could apply in the real world. And he also would always say when we did presentations, like, okay, I'm testing you guys and preparing you for employment. So if there was ever something on our slide that he didn't think was true or he didn't necessarily agree with, he wouldn't just kind of like nod like sometimes professors do, but he would stick his hand right up in the air and say, you know what, please explain this further. And it was kind of terrifying, but definitely I think will be good practice for when I eventually get a job.
Right, you're probably right. Thank you for the introduction. All right, so let's get into some of the nuts and bolts. Like getting started. I know you're all older and far wiser than when you arrived at Boston College, but talk about getting started. You know, you want to be a neuroscience major, you want to study in the Lynch School. How do you get started? What's the advising program, the basics of the registration program? Like, how do you push off academically from the beginning? Who helps you? How did you do it?
So for me, I applied directly into the School of Education. So that was the school I chose when I applied to Boston College. I kind of knew I wanted to be an applied psychology major just from reading about it, but I obviously didn't really know what it was until I started taking classes. And so the first time I really thought about taking classes was during orientation. And that's actually where you end up registering for your classes during your orientation. And then in that orientation period, you're paired with an academic advisor. So for me, I was paired with an advisor who is in the Lynch School. And since I am in one of the pre-professional schools, there were certain classes that I had to take as a first semester freshman in the Lynch School. And that was a course called Child Growth and Development, and then the ERA course that I had talked about earlier. So for me, that was really great that I had already those 2 classes kind of checked off, and I only had to think about 3 more. And then my advisor during orientation was really helpful in making sure that I was taking courses that I was interested in, but also that would fulfill requirements that I would need to graduate.
Good, that's a good start. Now, somebody asked a question, which is a good, like a nuts and bolts question about getting supplies. Like, how do you get books? How do you find out about the books? Are most of the classes asking for online materials or things that you print out rather than books? Can one of you give an example of the kinds of ways that you need to gather materials for your class?
Yeah, so especially as someone who has taken a lot of science classes, those definitely normally want you to have a textbook, but also honestly, just in psychology classes, I find that a lot of my homework has to do with reading. And whether I think especially kind of freshman and sophomore year, a lot of that reading did come from textbooks. So in terms of getting those books, you go on the Boston College bookstore website, and you type in the course code in the section, and professors will put in which books they want you to get, basically. So you have the option of ordering them from the bookstore ahead of time through that online process. You can also just go to the bookstore and get the books that you need. I personally use Amazon Rental for my textbooks at this point. I just find it to be a better option, more cost efficient. There also are sometimes you'll have people who had the books already who are willing to sell them for a cheaper price. So there are really a lot of options to get those textbooks and get those materials. But I have found that as I've become a junior and going into my senior year now, it's less textbook based as you get into kind of higher level classes. A lot of them for me have been reading neuroscience articles to prepare for class that we're going to discuss in class that day. Or I took a class called the Architecture of East Asia, which fulfilled my art core requirement. And she wanted us to print out the materials every day and bring them to class. But she had all of those uploaded on our online kind of class website to print out. So yeah, I hope that answers your question in terms of how you get textbooks. And
That's great. That's great. Talking about starting off, talk a little about the transition as far as expectations of your teachers. You all were very good high school students. I can certainly attest for Lizzie. I remember admitting you, and it wasn't a clerical error, Lizzie. I would admit you had done everything you were supposed to do at Rosemont High School. But if you can talk a little bit about the differences between what you needed to do in high school and to be successful and get good grades, and what kind of things you need to do in college to meet the expectations of your professors.
Sure. We can take that one. I think the transition from high school to college is a difficult one on a couple of different levels, right? Because it's a completely different mindset in terms of the way you go about school and the way you go about life, right? In terms of living on campus for the first time with like all your friends and having that very residential experience, and adding kind of a different layer of difficulty to your classes is obviously a major adjustment. The biggest thing that was different for me was that like classes and like your work time isn't necessarily contiguous anymore, where it's like in high school you wake up at, you have classes starting at 8 and you go until 2. You have like that 6-hour block of classes. Whereas now for me, I only have, I'd say roughly like 15 to 16 hours of class in any given week, and it's spread out across 5 different days. I might have class at 12, a class at 1, and then be done for the entire day. And so I think the biggest adjustment is in college, there's definitely enough work where if you wanted to be working every single hour of the day, you would have something to be doing. but it's more so prioritizing and thinking about how you can work efficiently and smarter in certain blocks of time. And so that means I almost everyone I know at BC lives and dies by the Google Calendar. And so that means being disciplined about setting aside, like figuring out your time, being disciplined about, realizing when you're falling behind and getting necessary help, or just putting in the work when you need to. I'd say that the workload is definitely something that takes some getting used to, but over time, especially as you start to get used to kind of the flow of things, and there's so many different sources of support at BC in terms of having upperclassmen there to provide you advice and kind of help you figure out the ropes. Like by the end of your first semester, you're usually like figuring out how exactly to budget your time and to enjoy everything that college has to offer, not just the classes, but also getting involved in research, extracurriculars, enjoying the social scene, and things like that. So definitely, I just think finding that balance is one of the biggest things.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that?
Sorry, I'm still figuring out the mute-unmute situation. But I think one of the biggest things for me was sort of the relationship building that happens in high school versus college. I don't know what sort of towns you guys are from, but in Rosemount High School, I went to the same Rosemount Middle School and elementary school with also like all of the same kids. And a lot of the teachers that I had spouses in the district. And so it was just like a very, I knew the same people for 12 years, and I formed bonds through that. And when you go to college, since you're only in class for a lot less time, as Harry mentioned, it can be a little bit more difficult to sort of get to know a professor or student in that class time. But what is really awesome is all professors, have office hours, and they love when students come. You can go to office hours with a question, with needing help, needing advice on what classes to take. But professors really love when you go and say, hey, I'm Lizzie, I'm studying this, or I don't know what I'm studying, and I'm interested in your class. Can you tell me more? Can you tell me what you researched, or even just tell me about your life? And that's a really cool change about college that I've really enjoyed, and I'm trying to take advantage of, because professors are really cool and can not only help you academically, but be a great resource all around at college.
How about, for any of you, how about the culture around academics? I didn't admit the other three of you, but I admitted Lizzie, and she was really smart. I'm guessing you three are very smart too. People tell me things, and I have access to data. But is it very competitive? Is it cutthroat? Do you find it's collaborative? Do you find that students take their work pretty seriously and they're really motivated? So when we're talking about the culture, there's a certain amount of stress, I guess, that comes along with places that have these academic expectations. But is it just that all the BC students know how to handle the stress, or is it less? Or is there some sort of collaboration that's involved that just naturally ratchets down the stress? Give me a little bit of sense of what, and the viewers, a little bit of sense of what the academic culture is like in terms of your relationship with each other.
Personally, I'd say that the academic culture is pretty rigorous, but it's an academic environment where it's not competitive. As you said, Chris, it's more collaborative, where everybody wants to work hard and do well and get good grades, but not at the expense of the person sitting next to them. And that people or students are really kind of wanting to work together. I know personally, Emma and I are roommates, and we would spend so many nights just sitting in the common room of our apartment, both just studying, and we take a lot of similar classes because her minor's in the School of Education and I'm also in the School of Education, and so we'd share study guides and ask each other questions and things like that. And so definitely it is a rigorous academic environment, and be prepared to put in that work, but you're not the only one putting in that work by any means. And that's where a lot of the true bonds come from, being kind of in that common room studying and sharing resources, things like that. I found that it's a very, very collaborative environment.
And then, you have expectations, or at least most of the students that come to us from high schools balanced academics with sports or performance art or clubs or service and jobs and other things. The academic expectations are primary and important, but do you find that there's still time and there's an appropriate balance in your lives? Maybe you take some time to figure it out, but do you find that there's enough time to make that balance, and your friends make that balance between some of these other things that make college so great and the academic goals that you've worked so hard to try to accomplish?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's the case. I mean, I think it's really important to involve yourself freshman year and build those social relationships as much as academics to a certain extent. Part of going to college is really building those lifelong relationships. Um, and while those won't all happen freshman year, a lot of them do. And I think that it's really important to be sure that you are balancing that academic and social life. So join as much as you can, and if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, you can always kind of let go of some of those extracurriculars if it feels like it's too much. And I think that it's also really important to learn how to sometimes say no. So if I have a big exam coming up and I feel really overwhelmed and stressed out by it, I have to learn how to say no to going to one of my meetings that week. And I think that's a really important life skill to learn, that some things do have to take priority over the other. So while kind of like in that example that I just said, I think that it is important to make sure that your academics still stay on top, even while you're building those social relationships. But maybe if you have a week where you have very little homework, you have no essays due, you have no exams coming up, take time to immerse yourself in your extracurriculars and spend time with your friends. So I really think that it's about finding that balance. And I do find that I have plenty of time to do other things. But I also think that as you kind of progress through your years at BC, you also learn how to manipulate your schedule a little bit to have time to do other things. So I'm a research assistant in a lab, and I was working that between 8 and 10 hours all last semester. Sorry, I just knocked over a water bottle every week. And I kind of made my schedule so that that would work out, so that I could do 2 4 to 5 hour chunks every week. So it's kind of a matter of balance, manipulation, all those sorts of things.
You know, for all of you, I've known you through the student admissions program. I'm repping my student admissions program shirt right now. And you come up for a tour, or you come up to do one of these information sessions, and you give an hour or two, sometimes more a week, and you come in, and even though that you have a lot going on, you can just compartmentalize that and like present to all these people that come to visit us in such a great way. And you always seem to balance the time. I know you have a million things going on, but it's always great to see you come up with us and do such great things for the people that come to visit us. And then you go off and do those other things. So it certainly can be done. And you guys have become experts at it. So there's again, I want to make sure we spend some of this time covering nuts and bolts. I'm going to keep going back to it. There's a little bit of course management that has to happen in your 4 years at Boston College. You don't have an unlimited amount of time and an unlimited a number of courses to take. You need to manage them well. You need to choose a major. All of you seem to have a minor, sometimes multiple minors. Sometimes these minors are in different divisions than the one that your major's in. Some of you are in programs that have certain prerequisites or certain courses in order to be pre-med or to be in some other designation. So if one or two of you can talk a little bit about choosing courses wisely, and how you can manipulate, using Emma's word, how you can manipulate the schedule to get everything done that you want in the 4 years that you're at Boston College.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot there to cover. And at least for me, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where again, there's so many different avenues of support at BC, right? So just listing them off the top of my head. So you have like your academic advisor, which you talked about earlier during your orientation. Then once you declare a concentration or major, you get an advisor within that field. You have professors who you're currently taking, in the sense of you have like your 4 to 5 classes that you're taking in the given semester, and all those professors are there to serve as, you know, mentors and advisors for you if you need them in terms of deciding what courses are best to take in the sequence. You also have upperclassmen who are just a wealth of knowledge. I remember BC has a great lunch date culture. So when I came to campus first as a freshman, I remember like that first week I was just being bombarded by requests like, I want to get lunch, I want to get coffee, I want to get dinner, by upperclassmen who wanted to share and kind of pay forward the advice that they had received as when they were freshmen too. And so you have upperclassmen who are there to walk you through the process of figuring out what courses to take when, who are the best professors, how exactly you want to structure and manipulate that schedule. And so for me coming in, I was in the business school, but also knew that I wanted to be pre-med into the bio double major. And so that was 2 pretty dense majors, and wanted to see, how I could fit that in and balance that well across my 4 years, especially given what I wanted, my academic goals, if you will. And I kind of started off, actually as part of Portico, you do a 4-year course plan you're given like a spreadsheet that the Carroll School is kind of pre-populated for you with all the different courses that you need to take as a business major. And I kind of adopted that and went around to a bunch of different people. So I went to like my academic advisor, met with countless upperclassmen trying to fill out that thing as best as I could. And it was obviously very fluid, and I kind of built in space for some kind of flexibility later on. But just having that plan and taking advantage of all the different resources and kind of avenues of support that are out there just allowed me to kind of map out a general academic plan that served me so well for registration every semester going ahead. So I think in my case, being proactive helps kind of plan things out, but obviously depends on your context and your major and things like that.
Someone in the Q&A asked about courses that are like bonding experiences, maybe like ERA is, courses like Pulse, Perspectives. I also think organic chemistry would qualify, wouldn't you think?
100% agree.
So there are some courses like that. Some are meant to be like Perspectives, things that are philosophy and theology. Others are just rites of passage for students thinking about medical school, like organic chemistry. Perfect. Okay. So again, we want to cover some interesting nuts and bolts, and some of the questions that are coming in are about class size, and maybe one of you can address the different class sizes that you've had and how they fluctuate over the years.
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's a great question. I know when I was trying to decide on a college, class size was a really big factor to me, because I mentioned before, I love sort of making the connections in class. And one of the things that's great about BC is that there's a lot of opportunities for small classes, both when you get sort of more advanced in your major, but also in a lot of different programs and options for freshman year classes, which, yes, have been great bonding opportunities for me and many other students, I would say. So I actually did two sort of freshman only programs. One was the Perspectives program that Chris just mentioned, which is a combination of philosophy and theology. We also had that class Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. So that was another thing that made it a bonding moment. But my current best friend to this day was from that class, and it was a great way to meet other freshmen, and it was a full year class. So we got to know the professor pretty well, and that was great. The other class that I did was through the core renewal program. So to sort of take care of some of those general education requirements, BC does a lot of work to make sure that they're really interesting to students and can help them explore cool topics and be like a genuinely good experience. I took one called Living in the Material World, which was a combination of chemistry and English, which are two classes that might not seem to go together off the top of your head, but we talked about sort of like the chemistry of how the environment works, and then in the English side focused on like how the environment has been portrayed throughout different literature and history, and that was such a great class. There was only 12 of us in that, and there was 20 of us in my Perspectives I was talking about before, so both very small classes as freshmen, and I'm good friends with many people from those experiences. So there are some classes that are larger, potentially for what maybe some of the intro classes, maybe some of the classes that just a lot of people are required to take, but in any class that's large, you'll have a small section once a week usually, where it's only maybe 15 to 20 students, and you can have a TA who will answer any questions that you have that you might be afraid to ask in the large group, and that's really helpful for a lot of students, myself included too.
There are a lot of questions on the queue about taking courses and being a minor in different divisions, and you've probably all have done that. I mean, Harry, you've made it your thing, being in the Carroll School and going through the pre-med track. I mean, there's no, there haven't been any problems in terms of getting the courses you need for your minor, despite the fact that you're a major or your feet are firmly in another division.
Yeah, none at all for me. So I can talk a bit about that. I think, especially if you're within the one of the pre-professional schools, so the Lynn School or the Carroll School of Nursing, double majoring outside of it or double minoring outside of your pre-professional school is actually encouraged institutionally. So, for example, in CSUN, one thing that the Carroll School does is if you do a minor outside of the Carroll School, you can drop one of the CSOM course on one of your required core business courses. And if you do a double major, you can drop 2 of those. So that's kind of how it's been for my, at least in my experience, where the schools actively encourage you to kind of really have that liberal arts conversation between disciplines, right? Because if you think about it, when else in your life are you going to be at a place for 4 years where you're surrounded by such a high concentration of different diverse academic perspectives and classes? And so there's so many classes that I've taken that I've just been, that I didn't, for example, I took a pass-fail theology class on morality, and there was no real, I guess, direct applicability to it. It didn't count for any of my major credits or anything like that, but it was just a really interesting professor who I'd been told I'd wanted to take. And so I was just taking those different classes and kind of different intellectual arenas is something I think overall just enriches your college experience, and something that's very, very much possible with the right planning and kind of the right, is very doable in my opinion.
People are asking questions about the core, and I want to answer it in a couple ways. Number one is that people can use AP credit, and maybe some of you used AP that you've taken in high school to apply towards the core curriculum. Someone even asked, how comparable are AP courses to freshman classes? Does anybody want to throw an answer at that one?
Yeah, so those are definitely great questions, and the core is definitely, I know, a very daunting thing that I'm sure you're all pumped about, but I promise it actually is a really valuable part of the BC experience.
Okay, well, listen, smart guy, let me ask you this, since you're the wise guy about it. You must have had a nice surprise in the core. You must have had a course that you wouldn't have taken unless there was a core, and then you took it and you're like, hey, I'm glad I took that.
For sure. Yeah, perspectives. I also took perspectives. Right. It was awesome. Which is why I said it truly is, it really is very valuable. But anyways, back to the question specifically. So in terms of AP credit, yeah, I actually have used AP credit specifically for a lot of the science requirements and the social science requirements. So AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Physics, AP Psychology. The first 3 I named go towards natural science, the other one towards social science. Unfortunately, those are also all part of my major, so it didn't really end up doing that much for me. But I was able to count some AP Math, AP Calc, I was able to count towards my major, which has freed up so much space for me and has been a huge relief. So yeah, it's normally those AP credits go through automatically, so there's not too much of a process you have to go through to do that. There are a few cases in which for some reason it might not show up on kind of the courses that you need to fulfill. However, you can just email student services and they're super helpful with that. In terms of course load, comparing to AP classes, so in my experience, I would say that kind of like the equivalent classes at BC are equivalent to their APs. So for example, AP Chemistry is kind of equivalent to General Chemistry at BC, and I did find that those workloads were relatively comparable. A lot of the material ended up being the same, but I definitely wouldn't say that all of the AP classes is kind of reflects how much work you'll need to put into all BC classes. I'd say generally it's probably more work, but it all depends on the class. Like it's kind of hard to make a blanket statement about how much work you need to put into each class. But yeah, so to conclude, I would say that the classes that are kind of side by side, AP and the courses at BC will be pretty comparable, but outside of that, I don't know if it would be appropriate to compare it to AP classes.
How often do you guys meet with an advisor during your semester or even your length of time? Are you pretty routinely checking in with someone in a department to make sure you're on the right track, to get pre-registered for courses? Do you see a lot of people that aren't your advisor but are in the departments or in these areas that help you out? How often are you visiting with professors in either your department or related departments?
Yeah, sorry, Helen, you want to take it?
Are you sure?
Yeah, go.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Harry. So it definitely, so before you register for classes each semester, you are required to meet with your advisor at least once. And so bare minimum, you're meeting with an advisor at least once a semester. I found that most students, including myself, really do form a personal relationship with their advisor. My advisor for the past 2 years has been Dr. Penny Hauser-Cram, who Emma talked about earlier, who is just the sweetest woman. And so we ended up meeting like once or twice a month, and I'd just kind of, go into her office and knock on the door, say hi, and then we talk about classes. But then she would also like help me with my resume, and she helped me get my research assistantship. And so it turned out she would really help me, figure out, make sure I'm moving along, progressing in my major, and, we'll graduate from BC, but she was also there as more of a life coach as well. And so definitely, if that's something that you're looking for in an advisor, most, if not all, advisors are really, really eager to have that relationship that's more than just coming in once a semester, being like, here are my classes, and then, getting that advice. And so I found that personally, my relationship with my advisor, Dr. Penny Hauser-Cram, has been like one of the most rewarding parts of my time at BC.
I know a couple of you have studied abroad, or at least attempted to. But how about fitting that into your academic calendar over 4 years? Was that a real struggle? Did you find that professors' programs were very flexible in terms of fitting that into the whole, 4-year plan at BC?
That's a great question. Sorry. Oh, thanks. So I studied abroad. I was there for the first half of this semester. Sad to have left, but it was a great experience while I was there, and I would highly recommend studying abroad. Don't let this defer you. To give a little quick background on my academic journey starting at the beginning, I did not come into BC knowing what I was going to major in. I wasn't undecided, but I picked economics and I wasn't sure. So throughout my first 2 years, I took economics courses, I took political science courses, I took history and English courses, and also a business law course. And I decided to stick with the economics, and then I'm also doing international studies, and have had time to do all of that experimenting, if you would call it that, and to do those double majors and then have time to study abroad. So it is certainly possible. There are a lot of different resources, whether it be your advisors, whether it be the study abroad office that every student has access to, or upperclassmen mentors, which have been hugely helpful to me, that I've just sort of met through clubs or through classes and have helped me guide me. But yeah, studying abroad is definitely an option for most students. And even if it seems like it's too much to fit into a semester, if you're doing something super crazy or just don't prefer that, they have a ton of summer options that are really great. I actually did one of those too, the summer after my freshman year, and had an awesome experience. And that got me my natural science core and was a very unique way to do that. I was in China, so.
I know there are 2 others of you that started to study abroad as well. I mean, would you echo the same sentiments as Lizzie?
I would love to speak on this. So I was also abroad for the first half of this semester. I was in Stockholm. It was amazing, highly recommend. But like I mentioned, I'm a neuroscience major, which in and of itself is a pretty credit-heavy major. So just for a little background, some majors at BC do have some more courses that are required of them to fulfill the major. And I also have a minor, and I'm on the pre-med track. So I was already kind of trying to fit a lot into my time here at BC, into my schedule. And this was something I was really nervous about, because I knew coming into college that I definitely wanted to study abroad, and it wasn't something that I was willing to sacrifice. So I went to my freshman year advisor, Professor McAvoy, who is one of my greatest mentors at BC, Professor Sean McAvoy. His wife also works at BC. But he basically said the same thing, kind of similar to what Harry was saying. He had me make a 4-year plan from the get-go. And he said, just leave an entire semester blank and assume right now that you aren't going to be able to fulfill anything during that semester. And I was like, what do you mean? And it actually ended up that I am going to be able to get credit for a lot of the classes that I'll get the classes I took abroad will be able to fulfill some requirements for my major, but it definitely is a stretch. Still looking ahead of my senior year, it was a little bit of a stretch. But the other thing is that I've kind of accepted that if I don't get to completely finish my minor, it is what it is. And the experience being able to study abroad was well worth that for me. And I'm still going to be able to take at least 5 of the classes for my minor, and that is what it is. So I think that that's also something important to consider, kind of just weighing what's most valuable to you. So for me, it was studying abroad, and I have no regrets about that.
Okay.
And I will also, if I could quickly jump in, I will also say like that in terms of your academic experience, that international component can take a couple different forms, right? So it's not just, doing academic coursework, but this past summer, for example, I spent 10 weeks in Cuernavaca, Mexico, doing research at the National Institute of Public Health there. And then the summer before that, my freshman year, I was in India for a couple of weeks doing an internship with an organization there. And these were all opportunities that I got through various BC organizations or professors or connections like that. And so that can take a couple different forms that I still think enriches your academic experience overall.
Well said. Very important. And it's a part of 50%, maybe more, of students' experiences there at Boston College. So well said. We're talking about all these options for students, but we should talk about support for students academically. What are the methods that students who are seeking tutoring, extra help, or academic support, what are the methods that you would use, your friends would use, or that are available at BC for students that are looking for academic support?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think no matter who you are, you'll probably have at least one class in college that is significantly challenging, but luckily at BC, there are plenty of different resources to help with that. We have a tutoring center called the Connors Family Learning Center, and it is free to students. You can go in there anytime and get a tutor, whether it's you want to see the tutor once or you want to see the tutor every single week about a certain subject. That's an option. Like I said, it's free and it's very easy to just book an appointment. I've gone in there several times for help with different economics courses, but I've also gone in there if I had a really tough paper that I wanted someone to read over, or like I went in there one time for French, just to have someone to sort of speak with. And it's a great resource that has helped a ton. And sometimes it can just help you to gain a little bit of confidence in what you're working on. In addition to that, you can definitely approach professors at any time if you're having trouble with their subject, whether it's a small question or you want to talk about a bigger challenge you're having. Professors are super, super willing to have conversations about that. And they've often had many students before, so probably have really good strategies about where to send you, what sort of problems to maybe give you to help boost your practice, things like that. And lastly, I would just add, friends or classmates often do homework together and help study for tests together. I've found myself in a lot of group projects formally at BC, but also even when there's not a group project, professors typically allow you to work with other students on problem sets or homework, and that can really help to form a bond like that. And then when you're struggling, friends or peers are definitely willing to help you out and help you get up to where you should be.
Good point, Lizzie. It kind of all begs the question, at least for me, like, where do you do your work? Like, do you do it in your room? Do you do it at the library? Do you do it in the cafeteria? Do you do it wherever you can? Like where, it does vary. Do you do wherever is available? Can you talk a little bit about where you're comfortable doing your academic work?
Yeah, it's been interesting kind of see the progression of that over the years. I started off my freshman year being a big BAPS guy. So BAPS is like our beautiful, like kind of Hogwarts style library with like stained glass windows and all that. And absolutely love BAPS. It's completely quiet. And then sophomore year kind of transitioned to O'Neill. Started off on O'Neill 3, which is some call it the social floor, because of the amount of people who are there and just more talking than working that's being done. And then on days before like an exam, I jump up to O'Neill 5, which is completely quiet floor. But then also there's like, I went through a phase my last semester where I was doing conference rooms in random buildings, which I found to be really fun. I go to BPL, teaching at the Boston Public Library. It's a 20-minute T ride away, and it's an absolutely beautiful place as well. And so I personally enjoyed studying all over the place and kind of random classrooms and things like that. And it's kind of good to see, you have such a beautiful campus. It's good to see different parts of it. And that's been one way to do it.
Helen, I saw, where do you do your work?
Yeah, so personally for me, my freshman year, I would always do work in the lounges in my dorm. So in every freshman dorm, there are these common spaces. There's one on every floor, I believe. And so that's where a lot of the freshmen really come and can mix. And then those spaces, though they're not like designated study spaces, kind of turn into quieter study areas towards the end of the night. And so that became a really great place for me because I'd go and I'd do a little bit of work, but then as the night got later, people get less focused, and then it just would turn into me and all my friends hanging out. And that's actually where I met Emma. And now we are great friends and roommates. And where I met a lot of my really close friends was people who, you know, freshmen who lived in my dorm, who lived on different floors and who I didn't really see during the day, but we'd all kind of congregate together in the freshman lounge and do our work and then just hang out. So there are definitely a lot of different study spaces available on campus, both like in your dorm or also, you know, formal libraries, dining halls, things like that.
Harry, I should note that my first ever job as a 16-year-old boy was at the Boston Public Library at Copley Square.
Oh, no way. Beautiful place.
I know, very historic. We shouldn't let this time go by without talking a little bit about research opportunities as a part of the academic, palette of opportunities. Have any of you done research, and what do you know of research at BC? Is it easy to get involved? How does it work?
Yeah, so I am a research assistant in the Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience Lab at BC. The way I came into that position was probably a little informal compared to most, but it started with just a good relationship I had with one of my professors. I was taking a class it was a research practicum in human memory, so we kind of designed an experiment and wrote a paper as if we had performed it. And I was in her office one day just kind of asking questions about an article I was to present on for that class. And the article had actually been written at BC. And I kind of said to her, like, this article was so cool. It's exactly what I'm interested in. Just kind of throwing out the comment that I really enjoyed it. And she said, oh, like, no way, are you interested in getting involved in research? I know a lot of the PhD students up there who are normally looking for research assistants. And I said, actually, yeah, because this was second semester of my sophomore year, so a perfect time to get involved in research. And she sent them an email, CC'd me, and a few days later I was meeting them and talking about how I could get involved with that research. So now I am helping out with the sleep guys, or what they're referred to. So we do a lot of research about emotion and sleep, which is not something that I thought I'd be interested in necessarily, but it is so cool. We're doing one study called the Overnight Emotions Study, not anymore in the current climate, but it involved staying up all night with participants to make sure they didn't fall asleep, and basically sleep depriving them for an entire night and seeing how their emotional responses to things changed over time. But it's been extremely valuable. It's actually the researcher I'm involved with, Tony, is the first person I emailed when I got back to the States. I was like, I need some structure. I need something to do. I don't have classwork. And he emailed me right back and said, I have plenty for you to do. So he's an awesome mentor outside of just research, just in life. And he's helped me. He's opened my eyes to a lot of other opportunities I could have in the future, and it is definitely probably one of the experiences I'm most grateful for at BC, is being able to be involved in that research.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend, if you can, getting involved in research, just because like the academic function of the university is all, like, obviously to teach students, but a key part of what BC does as like a tier 1 research university is producing research and contributing to kind of the academic knowledge base of the scientific and other academic communities. And for me personally, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in a variety of different capacities. I mentioned Dr. Landrigan earlier in my intro, and I actually, in one of my conversations with him, like, was talking about kind of similar to Emma, like talking about his research, like, this is so fascinating, and asked him if there's any way to get involved in anything he was doing. And he like immediately added me onto one of his projects. And so we just finished a major kind of a major review of the human health effects of ocean pollution, and it just actually got accepted for publication. So it's strange to see your name written next to like scientists from the WHO and all these like amazing epidemiologists, and I'm like, oh, Harry should have gone right there. But it's one of those really cool experiences to kind of get involved in the academic process, and kind of also get to see, get to do some writing and get your name published that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fascinating. We covered a lot of ground. Some people had questions about some of the things that, as an academic advisor, I know a little bit about, and changing majors is probably the most anticlimactic thing there is. Declaring a major isn't a declaration. It's just, filling out a form, and changing majors is very similar to that. Changing schools can be very complicated and textured, especially at this time, because we're really not allowing students at the admission stage to make any changes to their divisions. There are a couple of exceptions, maybe not worthwhile talking about here, probably best to be discussed with who an admissions counselor might be for the specific viewer out there that might be interested in that. But I think all of you talked about taking courses all over the place, not just satisfying requirements, but also picking up a minor and taking courses that are interesting, studying abroad, taking advantage of research opportunities, and becoming better students. Don't you feel as though you're a better student than when you arrived? Harry said it in terms of the techniques, but I would think that in terms of your skills, you must be better, right? You're a better writer, thinker, speaker. All these things must have been better. I'm guessing in that all the nodding of the head. So, and even though the world around us is in this state, it seems really normal to talk about home, doesn't it? Talk about school and talk about the things that bring us all together. So I appreciate that, and I think all of our viewers appreciate that too. And again, I encourage the viewers to keep the conversation going if they want to reach out to any of the panelists that we have. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the future class of 2024. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the holiday, Passover, Easter. Take time with your family and really appreciate what you have. And maybe I'll see you again at one of the future broadcasts. Good night, everyone. Great job, guys.